This is Retrospective Facilitation, a podcast for facilitators that want to make their retrospectives even more effective. Listen to industry experts, authors, and executives that advocate powerful retros share their stories and insights on how to reflect, adjust, and become more effective. To receive updates on the latest episodes, subscribe to our newsletter at thisisretrospectivefacilitation.com and win a chance to ask questions to our guests. Have you ever found your retrospectives producing only action items for the easy, low-hanging fruit? But then what? How do you continue iterating? What's next? In this episode, we will talk about double loop learning, a concept by Chris Argyris, to help look past the obvious and have our retrospectives question our assumptions. Our guest today is Joanne Perold. Joanne is passionate about helping teams and people grow and improve. She is a graduate of the PSL, Problem Solving Leadership, and has worked for more than a decade in the software industry in all areas of software development. She is a frequent speaker and attendee at Agile and testing conferences. Joanne, welcome to the show. How did you start facilitating retrospectives?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Joanne, and I'm from South Africa. I started facilitating retrospectives actually, I think it was around about 2008, 2009. I had done a Scrum product owner course, actually, and we were implementing Scrum in our organization. And the retrospectives part just really spoke to me as a way of helping people be better, helping teams be better, just creating that time to stop and think and figure out how you can solve some of your problems, or just look at the way you're doing things, or create time for introspection. So I just saw so many possibilities in it. And even though I was supposed to be the product owner, I still really loved the retrospective side, and so I started facilitating retrospectives with my team. And in the beginning, I was the team lead and the product owner and the kind of team manager, and so I did very, very many things wrong. But we actually managed to get quite a few interesting improvements quite early on, just from taking that time to stop and think about how we were doing things. And so that was really awesome. And then I carried on from there. I left that organization eventually and became Scrum Master and then a coach. Yeah. And so now I do retrospectives all over.
Joanne, how did you learn about double loop learning?
Great question. So I first learned about it from Esther. And what I noticed is that in the beginning, when you're working with teams, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, I guess is the right word. There's a lot of things that are fairly straightforward and fairly easy to fix when you're looking back and you're looking at your process, mostly because you've never stopped to look at your process before. And so there's all this kind of, it's like human debt, and some of it's technical debt and some of it's process debt, and all of these things that start to pile up over time. And so if you just take 5 minutes to just pause and to look at your process and what you're doing and how you're working together, it's quite easy to start to see, what's going on and to start to make small improvements going forward. And that works really well for kind of the first, I don't know how long it is. It's probably about 6 months. Maybe it's a year. It depends on the team, I guess, and how long they've been going for. But then after that, after you start to shift those small things, then you start to realize, oh, hang on a second, it's a little bit more difficult now. It feels like we've solved all the problems and there's nothing really going on for us. And I hear that often, actually. Oh, like, what do you do? Because we don't really have, our team's a high-functioning team, and we're actually all really awesome, and the retros feel like a waste of time. And I hear all of that from the teams that I work with and from the people that I train sometimes. And so that also, and I saw it with my teams as well. I saw it like, oh, okay, now it's getting hard. It feels like we've dealt with all this easy stuff. And so I wanted to look at, okay, well, now that we've dealt with this easy, like, what's next? What's the real meat now? Because that's where the good stuff comes, actually. And that's when I was reading, I think, on Esther's blog, or I can't remember where it was, and that's where the double loop learning stuff struck me, and I thought, oh wow, okay, hang on a second, this is what we're really after. We're after the second phase, this where we really start to challenge not just our process, but the way that we think about our process, like where we start challenging our mental models themselves, and so, like, that was for me the goal. That was kind of like, oh wow, you know, what's going on with our mental models, what's going on with how we see the world. Is that the stuff that we really got to start looking at? Because that's going to give us the big pushes, that's going to give us the real changes in what we do. Is there a stepping stone between just learning and single loop and double loop? That's a great question, and I don't know, actually. I wouldn't be able to say. There's a part of me that thinks maybe there's a stepping stone, and there's a part of me that thinks that I don't know, like, is it synchronous? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's asynchronous, and maybe sometimes, depending on the context, it has to be synchronous. So it's a great question, and I guess my answer at the moment is I'm not sure. I can tell you the way I've experienced it for myself is, in some contexts, it's really, yeah, just learning to learn in different ways. For me, or learning to learn with experience. And then for me, the single loop was easy. And for me, the single loop was really focusing on how do we do things. So changing your processes, how can we improve what you do, what we do, or how can we improve the way that we're doing things? Because that's quite a straightforward question. And it's quite easy to think about, oh, okay, hang on a second, I just did that, and how can I improve what I just did? But then it's a little bit more difficult to ask yourself the question, why do I think that what I'm doing is the right thing? Because often, like, we don't want to answer that question, because that means that right now I'm wrong, right? And so that's the tricky. Or maybe right now I'm not wrong, but maybe right now I'm choosing an option that isn't the best option. And as humans, I think that's, like, really hard for us to do sometimes, because we don't like to be wrong, I guess. And also, I have this theory on humans and the path of least resistance. So in my experience, we like to take the path of least resistance because it's easy, right? So you want to do the things that are easy. You do the things that are easy first. And sometimes it's hard to, like, step back and do the things that challenge us. Like, it hurts a little. So and I see these patterns in myself all the time. I see them in teams. I see them in organizations. Like, we want to be better, but we don't necessarily want to put in the work, because, it's like, I want to lose 100 kgs, but I don't really want to go on a diet. I still want to have chocolates or whatever the case may be. But it's all the things. We're like human. So asking ourselves the question of, like, and challenging our own thinking, I think that's hard. And so I guess, for me, that's why also the Scrum Master role is so important, is because it's hard for us as humans to ask ourselves this question. But when somebody else is asking the question, and that somebody else is an objective observer, and they're just asking, like, do we really think, do we really think that this thinking is the best thinking for you? Or do you really think, or what other ways, asking new questions about what other ways could we solve this problem? And what are we not thinking about right now? Or what do we know that somebody else is doing that we haven't tried yet in for this problem? Or, I don't know, anything that challenges the current, like, our current mental models. It's probably a lot easier coming from someone else than it is, like, oh, but no, if I ask that, then I'm saying we're wrong.
Joanne, how do you introduce double loop learning in a retrospective? If you use the 5 steps framework, at what point would you use it?
I haven't done it in the past as explicitly saying we're going to go with double loop learning, and I think you're helping me to create my own double loop learning. Like, what if I did that? What would happen? So that's kind of cool. I like that. Thanks. Um, what I have, yeah, most of the time it's for me during the generate insights part. It's the thinking, looking at the data that you have, and starting to question that data, based on, so asking about patterns, asking about, looking for patterns of behavior, looking for patterns of ways of doing things, and then questioning what do we think are the things that are keeping these patterns in place, and also asking questions around, are these patterns still serving us? So from are these patterns still serving us, as well as, what if this wasn't the problem? Like, what I see often is it comes up as planning, right? So there's a couple of things that I see as patterns in many teams. The first one is, teamwork as a pattern. So when things go well, a lot of people comment on teamwork and how the team works together. And when things go badly, the same thing happens. Like, we didn't work well as a team, kind of thing. And the same with communication. I see communication come up as a pattern. So not enough communication often comes up, or communication was great if things go well, and so those are kind of great things, but then what doesn't happen is people aren't challenging. Okay, so if this is awesome for us, communication, what are the specific things about it that led to it being awesome, so that we can carry those things forward, as opposed to just looking at the kind of overarching, general communication that was good or it was bad or whatever. So I see those as patterns. Um, and another thing that I see is, around planning. It's what I'm seeing quite a lot at the moment, is that if things don't go well, then often teams, they kind of they think that they haven't planned enough. So, oh, we didn't plan enough. We didn't align enough. We didn't whatever. But a lot of the time, it has to do with planning. And so I'm trying to kind of question, uh, you know, is it really the planning that's the problem? Or what if more planning couldn't save you? What if you needed to do something else? What would that something else look like? And how could we experiment with that? So that's the kind of questions that I would want to ask, is that what if it wasn't planning? What if it was something different? What if we think it's planning, but actually our thinking is flawed in this situation? And what we need to do is we need to do something else. And what would something else look like? And how could we experiment with that? So, what if we didn't plan? What if we just did more doing in smaller chunks, for example? Or what if we actually all got in a room with multiple teams? Often that becomes the thing. It's the synchronization and coordination that's the problem. Um, so so then I want to ask them, and they always think that it's a planning problem, and I don't know. For me, I don't know the answer, because you don't always know the answer. But you want to get them to question, like, their thinking around it. Like, is it really planning, or could it be something else? And what could something else look like? So those are the questions I'm playing with at the moment.
Johan, can you tell us an experience where it was hard to reach double loop learning with one of your teams?
I do, actually. I've got some good examples at the moment, because so at the moment I'm working with a large organization. It's very big, and we're only working in a small portion of that organization. But even the portion we're working in is quite large. It's about 1,200 or 1,400 people. And so what they do at the moment is they release on a monthly basis, and there's the releases are quite big, and there's lots of different teams involved in the releases, and lots of different, items get released every month. And so at the end of the release, they have what they call a post release retro, where everybody gets together and they have a look at what happened, and they see how they can, understand and improve their release, so that they can do things better going forward. And we've kind of experimented. A lot of the time there's between sort of 30 and 50 people in the retro, so it's quite big, and we only have 2 hours. So we've got 2 hours to So at the moment, I'm coaching some coaches, and they're actually doing the facilitation. I just help them plan, and I help them, and I'm there. So there's 3 coaches. We have one main facilitator, and then the others provide a supporting role. They'll do whatever the coach needs at the time. And so the tricky part is that sometimes you often get different people. So there's always new people at the retro. There's always people that haven't been before. There's some people that have been a few times. There's some people that have been once. You also get representation from different teams because it's not mandatory, and it just depends on what's going on. So there's quite a few challenges to the whole thing. And in the beginning, we had a lot of low-hanging fruit came up. So a lot of the low-hanging, there was a lack of alignment and there was a lack of visibility. So there was all of those kinds of things. So we've actually worked quite hard with the PMO actually and some of the other teams at starting to figure out how we could solve some of those problems. There are a lot of problems around coordination and alignment. So this organization still has a project management office, and so we worked with the project management office. And what they did was they created a massive portfolio level or coordination level Kanban system to visualize a lot of the bigger projects that involved multiple teams. And they stuck it on a wall. And it's become amazing because that wall is now an attractor for everybody to go to and to see. But that was just kind of the low hanging fruits. So at the moment now, it feels like the last couple of retros, the things that came up were quite similar. And one of the patterns that I see repeating is lack of planning. So they feel like they're not planning very, very well, or they're not planning at all. They're not planning enough. And what I know is that planning is not the problem. And so I need to challenge them to try and ask different questions around that, because planning is not the problem. The problem is the unknown unknowns that they come across every single time. And so every time, for the bigger the project, the more unknown unknowns. The smaller the batch size, the easier it is to coordinate, the easier it is to get work done, the less unknowns they have. So it's really kind of around trying to shift. It's going to be to try and shift their mental models around the planning part. And some of the challenges that I face is that, like I say, humans, they don't really want to know that they're wrong. So they're also, the organization itself is quite kind of set in how it does things, and so they're not always great at asking themselves the question, like, is our thinking the problem here? So yeah, and with a group of 50 people, when you're kind of asking them to challenge their own thinking, it gets quite hard because people aren't always, they're tired, and so they think they aren't at their best always. They don't have time to think about these things sometimes, and so then they get defensive. Yeah, they don't have time because they're too busy trying to get stuff done. Yes, well, so that's the other thing that I'm trying to get them to see is, like, if we just did less things, then we might still have the same kind of, we might still have a great outcome, even better outcome, but we will have less handovers and less delays and less, so those are the kind of things that I'm struggling with this team. I do find that when you want to shift mental models, that often creating simulations or ways for people to create new experiences for people can help them shift the mental models. What I wonder about is, like, is the retro the place to create those experiences? Because I don't know. I don't necessarily think so.
Joanne, what was the objective of a retrospective with such a large group?
What we were trying to do is that we were actually trying to contain the retrospective so that it was really just focusing on the process of implementation itself. So the one day when they actually do the physical release, what are all the things that happen and how can they improve that? But because that's a really, really difficult frame to create and the coaches are a little bit inexperienced, what has happened is that people think about all the things that have happened in the month for them and all the projects and what went wrong and all the things. So how we're doing it at the moment is we we don't want them to sit in their own teams. We're actually trying to create cross-team learning. So we're and empathy actually. So we're trying to get them to mix up as much as possible. So we've done some World Cafe style retros where we do a kind of one person at the table and they do some kind of gathering data, and then they swap and they go find a new table. So we're trying to cross pollinate, and it's not great. And there's a lot of there's a massive lack of coherence in the whole organization. So it's not always easy. But what we are finding is that the outcomes of these retros haven't really been necessarily like massive organizational improvements yet, but there have been these really kind of small, tangible, kind of awesome things that have come out. So the one thing is that people have built relationships across teams that they never had before. So quite a few people didn't know each other. They had never met before. They didn't know what other teams did or what they were busy with or anything like that. And actually, some of the time they were dependent on each other. So now they were starting to meet each other and know who those people were. So people were forming relationships with new areas in the business, which was really cool. Also, because of the nature of what we were discussing, they were discussing all the problems that they had. So they were also finding common ground between each other. So, we also struggled with that. So that was the one thing. The other thing that was happening was that some of the time, some of the teams had solved problems that other teams were having. So they were learning from each other. So, no, we did these things, and that worked for us. Maybe you can try those things. So there's these small little things that are coming out that are actually, they're intangible, but they're hugely, hugely valuable, because those are the things that actually change the business over time. And in the beginning, the coaches didn't notice it. They were kind of like, I don't know about these release retros. I feel like they're a waste of time, and like, what are we really doing? And it's the same stuff over and over, and all of that kind of stuff. And I said to them, no, like, there's a lot of gold here, and here's how you can see the gold. Like, the CIOs are starting to come, so the big people were starting to come and to see what was going on, the people who can really affect change. We were getting bigger audiences, which meant that people were finding value from it. So every time we got more and more people involved. So we had a wider audience, more people. There was a lot of learning from each other, lots of good things coming out, and new relationships were being built. So next time when people need things, they know who to speak to.
Johan, can you tell us something about the logistics to create a retrospective for such large groups?
We're lucky enough to have one room for it, which is quite a big room. And then we get them to set up tables, groups of tables, so we can really kind of optimize for collaboration. So there's only one room in the business that can accommodate this setup and this. So we have to book it kind of in advance, and we make sure we get it, and we make sure we get the tables. We bring a couple of whiteboards and some flip charts in as well, and some sticky notes, so there's space for people to collaborate and talk and stuff like that. So we set them up in groups of about kind of 6 to 8 people, depending on how many. We don't have anyone remote, just because we don't. There are remote teams and that, but it's that kind of thing with that size. It's impossible to facilitate half remote and half in a room. It just makes the experience awful for everybody. Actually, I would rather exclude the remote people than try to do that, or make everyone remote. So those are the kind of options. We got given a time box, so we couldn't request a decent time box. So we got given a time box of 2 hours, and that's what we actually plan less than that, because 90% of the time people are late. So we know that they're going to be like between 5 and 10 minutes late, and then we try to finish between 5 and 10 minutes early, because we're trying to create new behaviors in the organization for like not having back-to-backs and not running over and all of those things. So we plan for 90 minutes, or just over 90 minutes. So we kind of, we do that. But we have 2 hours. So I guess the last thing is that there's another one on Tuesday, and the one on Tuesday I really going to try to take it to a new level, because I was having that conversation with the coaches and saying these are great, but now we need to kick them up a notch, and now we need to start asking the tough questions and to try for this double loop learning. Now we need to question their thinking, and so that's my plan for Tuesday.
Joanne, do you have any final thoughts about double loop learning that you want to share with the audience?
I guess the only thing is that it's not easy, but it's definitely worth it. And I don't think there's any straightforward, just do this and you'll get it answers. There's really just understand the principle and the concept, and then experiment. Like, see what's working, challenge your own thinking and your own mental models. Like, is what I'm doing the right thing to be doing for this team? And is the way I'm doing it the right? What if somebody else did it, or whatever? Just challenge yourself as well.
We are reaching the end of the show, and we're going to ask Joanne the same 3 questions we asked to all our guests. The first one is, what is your favorite retrospective activity?
Cool. So my favorite, I think, retro activity is probably a timeline. So I love using timelines for gathered data, because they can bring out so much great information and create a very awesome way to have a shared understanding of what's going on for people. How I usually run it is I draw a line on a whiteboard or on a flip chart or on paper on the table or wherever I can. And I write like the start of the sprint on the one side and the end today, usually, because hopefully that's the end of the sprint, on the other side. And then I dish out sticky notes, and I ask everybody in the team or everybody in the retro, depending on what retro I'm doing, to write down on sticky notes all the things that happened for them over the past, since the start till the end, till today. And I get them to write. So I want everybody to write first before anyone sticks anything up on the timeline, because I find that if you let people stick stuff up, then it usually anchors everybody else, or otherwise a conversation starts, or some people don't. And you also want everybody to write their own individual sticky notes. What I see sometimes is people make the mistake of trying to co-create a timeline. And then when that happens, then it's basically the loudest person in the room's timeline, and everybody else's ideas fade to the back. So if you get everybody to write on sticky notes first, you're really getting all the voices in the room, and you're making sure that what's important to everybody is coming through. Then I get everybody to just stick them up one at a time. So one at a time they go and they put them on the timeline where they think that they belong. And they just explain a little. Like, I don't want to go into too much detail, because otherwise you can spend all your time on gathered data, and you don't want to do that either, right? You just want the data in the room. So I get them to stick it all up, and then once it's there, you've got this really beautiful perspective. You can start to see patterns. You can start to see what's the things that are important to everybody. What's kind of what happened. It can also, I did it once, which was super fascinating. With it was in a strange organization, but it was for a project team, and the project had gone very badly. And then they all stuck up their sticky notes, and there wasn't one single sticky note that was the same. And I looked at that, and it told me so many things. Like, I could just see immediately, just from the sticky notes, I could tell these people have never been in the same room together and spoken about this work. Like, they just haven't. Like, from the one person thought it started in 2015, other person thought it started in 2017. It was insane. So there's lots of information for you as a facilitator and a scrum master and a coach to kind of see what's going on for people as well. You can get a lot out of it for that. So you can see where to go next, right? Yeah, so that's my favorite.
Joanne, what is a book that you're reading right now?
The book that I'm reading right now, or one book that I'm reading right now, there's actually a few, but one that I'm finding super interesting right now is Covert Processes at Work, which is really interesting and a little bit different. Yeah. So It's really about and I see it all the time. There's the way things in organizations get done that's written down, that's codified, that is the actual process. And then there's the way that people get stuff done. And it's sometimes very different from that actual process. And I've been seeing these unfold, yeah, which has been super fascinating for me.
And a final question, Joanne. What is your favorite dish?
What's my favorite dish? As in food? Ah, cool question. Sure. That's a tough one. There's so many really great ones. But if I'm pushed, I think I'm going to have to go with pizza because I feel like pizza can solve all the world's problems. Oh, and I like proper, like really thin, super thin crust. Like, oh, proper, yes. Mm-mm-mm.
Our guests share lots of insights and ideas. Which change are you going to try in your next retrospective? Tell us on Twitter with hashtag #ThisIsRetrospectiveFacilitation or leave us a comment on thisisretrospectivefacilitation.com. You can connect with Joanne on Twitter at Joe Perold. Norm Kurt, known as the father of retrospectives and author of the book Project Retrospectives, suffered a disabling brain injury in a car accident 20 years ago. Visit thisisretrospectivefacilitation.com/helpnorm for details and a link on how to contribute to his fund. Thank you for listening. This is Enrico Teotti. Till next time.